In a small village tucked between the whispering pines and the silent mountains, there lived a woman named Ilara. Her life was a quiet one, measured by the rising and setting of the sun and the turning of the seasons. She was known for her gentle hands that could soothe a nervous animal, and her kind smile that was like a glimpse of sunshine on a cloudy day. She loved her husband, Aaron, with all her heart, and she believed he loved her too. But their small cottage held a silence that was heavier than the winter snow, a sadness that clung to the walls like frost. For all their years together, their home remained empty of the one thing Ilara longed for most. The sound of children's laughter. In this village, a person's value was often counted in practical things. A strong back for farming, a clever mind for trading, and for a wife, the ability to fill a home with a family. Because Ilara could not bear children, many people saw her as less than whole. They did not say it to her face, not at first, but their whispers followed her like rustling leaves whenever she walked to the market. They used a cold, hard word to describe her, barren. It was a word that made her feel like a field where nothing could ever grow, a tree that would never bear fruit. The worst of these whispers came from inside her own home. Aaron's mother, a stern woman with eyes like flint, never missed a chance to remind Ilara of her failure. His brothers, who were rough and impatient men, called her a useless burden. They said she was cursed and that her misfortune would eventually spread to their farm and their fortunes. Aaron would sometimes try to defend her, but his words were weak, and his will was weaker. He was a man caught between the wife he loved and the family that demanded obedience. The pressure built day by day, a pot left to boil for too long on the hearth. The breaking point came on an evening when the air was turning sharp with the promise of autumn. Aaron's mother laid down a terrible choice for her son. He must send Ilara away or be cast out from the family himself. That night Aaron came to Ilara with a face pale with grief and shame. He could not meet her eyes as he spoke. He told her a story about her aunt falling suddenly ill in a town far away. He said they must go to her at once. His voice was flat, and his story was full of holes, but Ilara's trust in him was so complete that she believed every word. Her heart, already so heavy, felt a new pang of worry for her family. She packed a small bag, her hands trembling, not knowing she was preparing for a journey from which she would never return. She climbed into the cart beside her husband, his brothers driving, and they rolled away from the only home she had ever known, straight into the waiting darkness of the forest. The wooden cart rattled and jolted, each turn of its wheels carrying Ilara further from everything she had ever known. She sat in the back, her hands clenched tightly in her lap, trying to quiet the fear that was beginning to whisper in her mind. She trusted Aaron. She had to believe his story about her aunt falling ill. Why else would they be traveling so late, with such grim urgency? But as the familiar, friendly path gave way to a narrow, overgrown trail, her trust began to feel thin and fragile. The comfortable sounds of the village faded away, replaced by a deep, waiting silence. The ancient trees of the forest closed in around them, their heavy branches blocking out the moonlight and casting the world into a darkness that felt both deep and alive. A cold dread, colder than the evening air, started to coil in her stomach. This was not the way to any neighboring village. This road, if it could even be called a road, was forgotten and wild. She leaned forward, her voice barely a whisper against the creaking of the axles. She asked Aaron where they were really going. Her husband did not turn around. He did not answer. He sat perfectly still, a statue of misery, staring at his own hands, as if he had never seen them before. One of his brothers grunted a reply, a low and ugly sound. He claimed it was a shortcut, a claim so obviously false it stole the breath from her lungs. She knew then, with a certainty that turned her blood to ice, that she was not on a journey to help family. She was being taken somewhere no one would ever think to look. The cart plunged deeper into the heart of the woods. The air grew sharp and bit at any exposed skin. Strange noises echoed in the distance, the call of a night bird, the rustle of something moving through the undergrowth. Ilara pulled her thin shawl tighter, but it was no match for the chill that was coming from inside her. She was a woman of hearth and home, of garden plots and sunny doorsteps. This primordial forest, with its shadows that seemed to move on their own and its profound, judging silence, was a terrifying alien world. She was an intruder here, and the forest felt unwelcoming. After a time that felt both endless and too short, the cart jolted to a sudden halt. They had reached a small, desolate clearing, a mere pocket of space surrounded by a wall of impenetrable trees. The brothers jumped down from their seat, their boots crunching on the frozen ground. The sound was harsh and final in the quiet. They walked to the back of the cart and looked at her. Their expressions were not angry. They were empty. That emptiness was more frightening than any rage could have been. They told her to get down. Their voices held no emotion, no humanity. Ilara shook her head, pressing herself against the wooden slats of the cart. She pleaded with Aaron. She used his name. She begged him to tell her what was happening, to make them stop. But her husband remained frozen in place. He was a prisoner of his own shame, a man so weak he would sacrifice the woman he loved to please the cruel people who raised him. He would not meet her eyes. He would not save her. This final betrayal was a physical pain, a wound that eclipsed her fear. The brothers did not ask again. They reached into the cart, their hands rough and impersonal, and hauled her out. She stumbled, her legs buckling beneath her, and fell to her knees on the cold, hard earth. The impact jarred her bones. One of the men tossed a small, empty water skin into the dirt beside her. It was a mockery of help, a gesture that showed just how little they cared if she lived or died. He spoke then, his voice flat and cold. He said the family was done with her. He called her a barren woman. He said she was useless. He said she brought nothing but bad luck. His words were like stones thrown at her soul. Then they turned away. They climbed back onto the cart as if they had simply dumped a sack of rotten grain. Her husband never once looked back. The brothers snapped the reins, and the horses lurched forward. Ilara could only kneel there, paralyzed by shock and devastation, watching as the cart disappeared back down the dark path. The sound of the wheels faded, swallowed by the greedy silence of the trees. Then there was nothing, no sound, no light, no hope. The world had become a very large and very cold place, and she was utterly alone in the center of it. The family she had loved, the home she had kept, the life she had known, it was all gone. She had been erased. The world had shrunk to a tiny, frozen point. Ilara knelt on the frozen ground, the cold seeping through her dress, numbing her knees. The silence left behind by the cart was a physical presence, heavy and suffocating. It was broken only by the ragged sound of her own breathing, puffing out in small, desperate clouds in the air. She was alone. The word echoed in her mind, a final terrible truth. They were gone. He was gone. She had been thrown away. Tears welled in her eyes, hot against her cold skin, but they froze on her cheeks before they could fall. Crying would not help her. Nothing would help her. The forest did not care about her tears. It was vast and ancient, and utterly indifferent to the small woman trembling in its grasp. The thought of just staying there, of letting the cold take her, was a tempting one. It promised an end to the pain, to the fear, to the crushing weight of her abandonment. But a spark, small and stubborn, flickered deep inside her. It was not hope, not yet. It was anger. It was a refusal to let them win. She would not die here, because they had decided she was worthless. She pushed herself up, her legs stiff and uncooperative. She had to move. To stand still was to freeze. She began to walk, choosing a direction at random. Every step was a struggle. The moon offered. Little light filtering through the thick canopy, and weak silver streaks that created more shadows than illumination. Branches like skeletal fingers snatched at her clothes and hair. Roots seemed to rise up from the dark earth specifically to trip her. She fell more than once, her hands scraping against rough bark and frozen stone. Each time she forced herself. Back up. The noises of the forest were a terrifying symphony. Every snap of a twig was a predator. Every rustle of leaves was a monster. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of pure terror. The cold was a constant, aching agony. She hugged herself, trying to conserve what little warmth she had left, but her fingers were growing numb. The empty water skin, still clutched in her hand, was a cruel joke. Time lost all meaning. It could have been minutes or hours. Her body was beginning to fail her. The will to keep moving was draining away, replaced by a deep, overwhelming fatigue. It would be so easy to just sit down, to rest against the broad trunk of a tree, to close her eyes. She stumbled again, this time, not getting up immediately. She lay in the snow, the cold a strange comfort now. This was it. This was where her story ended. But then she saw it a flicker, a tiny dancing point of orange light in the impossible distance. She blinked, sure her desperate mind was playing tricks on her, but it remained. A light. A candle, a lantern, a fire. The spark inside her flared. She pushed herself onto her elbows, then to her knees, then, miraculously, to her feet. She would not die tonight. She would reach that light. She dragged herself forward, her movements clumsy and slow. The light grew steadily brighter, resolving into a soft glow from a window. And then she could see its source. A cabin, a small, sturdy log cabin nestled in a clearing. Smoke curled from a stone chimney, carrying the faint, beautiful scent of burning pine. It was real. It was a place where people lived, where there was warmth. A sob escaped her lips, a mix of relief and exhaustion. She tried to call out, but her voice was a frozen croak, lost in the wind. She took one final lurching step toward the promise of salvation, toward the solid wooden door. But her body had given its last ounce of strength. Her legs folded beneath her. The world tilted and went dark as she collapsed into the snow mere feet from the doorstep, the light from the window washing over her still form. The cabin door creaked open. A rectangle of warm golden light spilled out, illuminating the snow and the woman lying in it. A small face peered out, then another and another. Asterisk, asterisk, the world was a soft, blurry warmth. The first thing Elara was aware of was the weight of a thick, rough wool blanket. The second was a crackling sound and the rich, earthy smell of a wood fire. She was lying on something soft, a mattress stuffed with straw. She was inside. Asterisk, the warmth of the cabin was a living thing. It seeped into Elara's bones, slowly chasing out the deep, persistent cold that had taken root within her. For 3 days she did little but sleep and eat the simple, hearty stews Torian prepared. The children were a constant, quiet presence. They would bring her cups of water or simply sit on the floor near the hearth, whittling small pieces of wood or mending rabbit snares, stealing glances at her as if she were a rare bird that had landed in their home. On the 4th morning, a new kind of restlessness filled her. She could not just lie there and consume their resources. She watched Bryn struggle to thread a needle, her small fingers fumbling with the frayed end of a woolen thread. Without a word, Elara pushed back the blankets and stood. Her legs were still weak, but they held. "May I?" she asked softly, holding out her hand for the needle and thread. Bryn looked surprised, then nodded, handing them over. Elara's hands, though still pale, remembered their work. In one smooth motion, she wet the end of the thread between her lips, pinched it flat, and guided it through the eye of the needle. She handed it back. Bryn's eyes widened. "How did you do that?" "It just takes practice," Elara said. She sat down at the sturdy table. "What are you mending?" "My tunic." It caught on a branch. Bryn held up the garment, showing a nasty tear along the sleeve. Elara took it. "A straight tear is not so bad. I can show you a stitch that will make it strong again, almost invisible." She found a small scrap of similar cloth in the mending basket. Her hands moved with a sure, practiced rhythm, demonstrating a tiny, perfect stitch. "You see, you go down here and then back up very close. It is like drawing a line." Bryn watched, utterly captivated. She took the practice scrap and tried to mimic the movement, her brow furrowed in concentration. Elara gently corrected her grip. Soon, both of them were bent over the work, a comfortable silence settling between them. Later, Finn and Lark were arguing over a slate, their letters messy and overlapping. "He is writing on my side," Lark complained. Elara leaned over. "There's room for both if you share." "Here." She took the slate and wiped it clean with her sleeve. She drew a neat line down the center. "This is Finn's half. This is Lark's half." She pointed to each side. Then, with a steady hand, she wrote the alphabet in clear, elegant script on the top of each side. "You can copy these. It is easier if you have a good example to look at." The twins stared at her writing, then at their own clumsy marks. They grew quiet, focused on trying to make their letters look like hers. Torin, who was carving a new axe handle by the fire, watched this unfold. He saw the way his wild children stilled under her calm attention. He saw the patience in her movements, a patience born of a gentle spirit, not of obligation. That evening, Elara ventured to help with supper. She took the lumpy, half-burned loaf of bread Bryn had pulled from the oven. With a sharp knife, she evened out the slices, arranging them neatly in a basket. She found a jar of wildberry jam and spooned it into a small bowl instead of leaving it in the jar. It was a small thing, but it made the rough table look cared for. As they ate, the cabin felt different. It was not just the warmth of the fire, but a new feeling of order, of small comforts attended to. The tear in Bryn's tunic was mended. The twins' letters were slightly less chaotic. The bread was cut straight. Torin finished his stew and looked at Ilara. "You have a way with them," he said, his voice low. "Thank you." Ilara looked around the table at the three children, their faces lit by firelight. They were not hers, but in this moment caring for them felt like the most natural thing in the world. "Thank you for bringing me in," she replied. For the first time since being left in the snow, she felt not like a burden, but like she might have something to offer. She felt, for the first time in a very long time, useful. Asterisk, asterisk, her eyes fluttered open. The light from a large stone fireplace danced on low log walls. The ceiling was beamed with dark, heavy timber. The room was simple, with a large wooden table, sturdy chairs, and shelves holding clay pots and wooden utensils. It was a place of function and warmth. A face appeared above her, blocking the firelight. It was a girl, maybe 10 years old, with a wild mane of red hair and a smattering of freckles across her nose. Her eyes, a bright and curious green, studied Ilara with a frankness that was neither fearful nor unkind. "You are not a witch," the girl stated, her voice matter-of-fact. "Your clothes are wrong for a witch, and you are too messy." A smaller face, a mirror image of the first, popped up beside her. A boy. "Maybe she is a snow queen." She fell from the sky. Another boy, his hair a shade darker, shoved his way in. "Snow queens have crowns, Finn. She does not have a crown. She is just a lady." Before the debate could continue, a large shape moved near the fire. A man stood up. He was tall and broad, shouldered, with a beard that hid much of his face but could not hide the quiet concern in his eyes. He held a wooden ladle. "Bryn, give the woman some space." "Finn, Lark, step back." His voice was a low rumble, like the sound of the forest itself. He did not sound angry, only firm. The children immediately obeyed, though they continued to stare. The man, Torin, approached slowly. He knelt by the bed, his movements careful so as not to seem threatening. He held out a chipped clay mug. Steam rose from it, carrying the scent of herbs and honey. "Can you sit up?" he asked. "You need to get something warm inside you." Ilara's body ached, but with effort she pushed herself up onto her elbows. Her hands trembled as she took the mug. The heat felt like life itself flowing back into her frozen fingers. She took a small sip. The tea was sweet and strong, and it spread a warmth through her chest that made her want to cry. The children crept closer again, a silent, fascinated audience. "What is your name?" the girl, Bryn, asked. "Ilara," she whispered, her voice hoarse from cold and disuse. "Ilara," Bryn repeated, testing the sound of it. "I am Bryn. These are my brothers, Finn and Lark. That is our father, Torin. You fell in the snow outside our house. We found you," Finn announced proudly. "You were very cold," Lark added, his eyes wide. "Your lips were blue." Torin watched her drink. "You are safe here," he said, and the simplicity of the statement made it feel true. "The woods are no place to be at night, especially not in this weather. You can stay until you're strong again." Elara looked from his kind, weary face to the curious, open faces of the children. They were not asking for her story. They were not demanding to know what a woman was doing alone in the woods at night. They were just there, offering warmth and safety without condition. It was a kindness so profound, so different from the world she had left, that the tears she had been holding back finally escaped, tracing clean paths through the grime on her cheeks. She was not useless here. She was just a person who needed help. The rhythm of life in the cabin became Elara's new world. She learned the patterns of their days. Mornings were for chores, afternoons for lessons and mending, evenings for stories by the fire. She taught Barren how to knead bread dough until it was smooth and elastic, how to braid it into a loaf that baked evenly. She showed the twins how to form their letters into words, reading to them from Torin's one precious book of tales until they could sound out the words themselves. One afternoon, a deep quiet settled over the woods. Torin was bundling furs into a large sack. "I must go to the village," he told Elara. "We need flour, salt, a new blade for the axe. I will trade these." He gestured to the valuable pelts. "I will be back by nightfall." The children begged too. "Go," but Torin was firm. "The way is long and the cart is slow. You will stay. Help Elara." A flicker of the old fear touched Elara's heart. The village meant people. People who knew her or knew of her. But she pushed it down and nodded. "We will be fine," she said, and she almost believed it. The day passed slowly without Torin's solid presence filling the cabin. Elara kept the children busy with tasks, but her ears were tuned to the path, waiting for the sound of the returning cart. When the light began to fade from the windows, she started to worry. When full dark fell and there was still no sign, her worry curdled into a cold dread that felt horribly familiar. Finally, the sound of wheels and horse hooves crunched on the frozen path. Relief washed over her so strongly her knees felt weak. She lit a lantern and opened the door as Torin guided the cart into the clearing. But the relief was short-lived. His shoulders were slumped, not with tiredness, but with a heavy weight. He would not meet her eyes as he carried in the sacks of supplies. He was quiet through their simple supper. After the children were tucked into their beds, he sat by the fire, staring into the flames, his big hands resting on his knees. Elara sat across from him, mending a sock, the silence between them thick and uneasy. People in the village were talking, he said finally, his voice a low rumble that seemed to startle the quiet. "There is a man there, from another village. He is looking for his wife. He says she disappeared months ago. He is sick with a guilty conscience. His family is falling apart without her." Elara's needle stilled. Her blood ran cold. The sock fell into her lap. Torin continued, still looking into the fire. "They said her name was Elara." The silence that followed was absolute. The crackle of the fire was deafening. All the safety, all the warmth of the cabin seemed to shrink away, leaving her exposed. The past had found her. It had reached its cold. Fingers into her new life and touched her. She did not need to ask if he knew it was her. The way he said her name made it clear. She wrapped her arms around herself, waiting for the blow. Waiting for him to tell her she had to go back, that her real husband was looking for her. Instead, he turned his head and looked at her. His eyes were not angry or accusing. They were full of a deep, weary understanding. They said she was barren. That was why they did it. The words hung in the air. The truth of it, spoken aloud by someone else, was both a humiliation and a strange relief. She nodded slowly, a single tear escaping and tracing a path down her cheek. She told him then. She told him everything. The years of whispers, the cruel words from his family, the weak man she called a husband, the lie of the journey, the coldness of the brothers, the emptiness of the clearing. The words spilled out of her, all the poison she had carried finally finding a release. Torin listened. He did not interrupt. He just listened until her voice grew hoarse and the story was done. When she finished, he was silent for a long time. Then he leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "A man who would do that does not deserve to find what he lost," he said, his voice firm. "A family that would demand that does not know what a family is." He looked around the small, warm cabin, toward the room where his children slept. "You have a home here, Alara, with us, if you want it." The choice was laid before her, not as a demand, but as an offering. The old life, a gilded cage of misery, was calling her back through the words of gossips. And here was a new life, built on rough logs and simple kindness, held out in the hand of a quiet lumberjack. She looked at this man who had asked for nothing, who had given her everything. She thought of the children who had already claimed her as their own. Her voice was a whisper, but it was sure. "I want to stay." Asterisk, asterisk. The decision was a stone dropped into a still pond, and the ripples it sent out changed everything. The fear that had clung to Alara since Torin's return to the village simply vanished. The past was a closed door. She had chosen her future, and it was inside these 4 log walls. Spring arrived, melting the snow and painting the forest floor with green. The cabin was no longer just a shelter. It was a home being woven together day by day. Alara's hands were never still. She planted a small kitchen garden by the door, showing Bren how to space the seeds. She helped Torin repair a hole in the roof, holding the ladder and passing up tools. In the evenings, she continued the lessons, and the twins' reading began, to smooth out the letters finally bending to their will. One warm evening, as fireflies blinked outside the windows like scattered stars, Torin stood up from his carving. He walked to the mantel and took down a small wooden box. He opened it and brought out a simple, smooth band carved from a dark piece of oak. He did not get down on one knee. He simply stood before Alara, his honest face serious in the firelight. "This was my mother's," he said, his voice quiet. "It is not gold or silver, but it is strong. It has lasted. I would like you to have it. I would like you to stay, not as a guest, as my wife, as their mother." Alara looked at the ring, then at the faces of the children, who were watching with wide, hopeful eyes. She did not need to think. Her answer was already in her heart, had been for months. She held out her hand, and he slipped the wooden ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "Yes," she said, and the word felt like a vow. The wedding was simple. They spoke their promises to each other under the canopy of new leaves, with the children as their witnesses. Bren presented Alara with a crown of wildflowers, and the twins held the rings on a pillow made of a folded cloth. It was not a ceremony. The village would recognize, but the forest seemed to bless it. Alara's heart once thought to be barren, now felt so full she thought it might burst. She learned that a mother was not just someone who gave you life. A mother was the one who stayed up with you when you had a bad dream. A mother was the one who knew how to take the sting out of a scraped knee with a kiss and a kind word. A mother was the one who loved you fiercely, protectively, and without a single condition. She had become that for Bryn, for Finn, for Lark. The story ends on a perfect summer day. Ilara is in the sunny clearing behind the cabin, hanging laundry on a line strung between two trees. The smell of clean linen and pine fills the air. Bryn is nearby, practicing her chopping with a small hatchet. Thwack, thwack, the sound is. Strong and sure. Finn and Lark are tussling with a friendly, shaggy dog that had wandered into their lives and decided to stay. Torin comes out of the woods, his axe over his shoulder. He stops and watches them for a moment, a slow smile spreading across his face. Ilara turns and sees him. She smiles back, a real easy smile that reaches her eyes. She looks at this family she has built. This family she chose and who chose her back. They were not perfect. They were loud and sometimes messy, and the cabin was always filled with the evidence of their busy lives. But it was filled with something else, too. It was filled with a roaring, wonderful, life-giving love. She had been left in the woods to be forgotten, but she had been found. She had been given a second chance, not just to live, but to truly belong. The end